Pennsylvania has been won. It has not been won by more than 2%. I think 1.7% was in the last few election cycles. So it's going to be a very narrow race.
In your universe, in your social circles, are there people that were either Republican or Democrat before this election and are changing their vote?
What we've been seeing in Bucks County is, and I don't know if this is reflected statewide, you may have seen the better data than I have, is that pretty much on a weekly basis, we're seeing anywhere from, let's say, 70 to 80 people changing their registration for Democrat to Republican, and then the independents are just behind them, maybe 50 or 60 or so are changing from independent to Republican. So we are seeing, and we've been seeing this trend now, I would say for the last 4 years, where the party flips, because people flip in both directions. Mm-hmm. But the party flips from Democrat and from independent to Republican are outweighing those going in the opposite direction.
Taylor Swift last night after the debate endorsing Kamala Harris. How many people think that endorsement will have an impact? I believe she has over 280 million followers on X and different social media. Very loyal following. Show of hands? No?
I think she's going to have a little impact. I think that she's out there in the media and she's influenced. She's got a followers. They follow, just like they follow Trump. They probably going to follow her. Some of them, not all of them.
Now, Allison, I want to ask you, in your microcosm, you're right here from the city of Philadelphia. Tell us what you're hearing from your community. What are the biggest issues that matter to folks, and which way, if you were to take a guess, just based on what you're feeling, if the election were to be tomorrow, how would the state of Pennsylvania go? To whose favor?
I think it's Camilla. I think it will go in her favor. I know in my community, a lot of people. Some people like Trump, some people like Kamala, and some people just don't want to vote at all.
Now, why don't they want to vote?
So they don't like either candidate.
And so is there anything that he could do to change your mind? Because like you said, you are an independent.
Well,
nothing you could foresee.
No. If he keeps on going on the way that he's speaking, just calling people names, it just turns me off. So I don't think he's a leader. He doesn't even sound professional.
Jacob, you talk to us about,
like
obviously,
Rocket Man?
Voter. What are you sensing in your community?
I couldn't tell you or give you a number of how many independents that are voting Republican with enthusiasm and how many Democrats that have said almost all something to the effect of, I cannot afford 4 more years of this. I'm voting for Trump.
Well, I just want to thank everybody. Really fascinating insight into the voters in this very important and critical battleground state. Thank you, guys.
The campaign also released a new 30-second ad on Wednesday featuring footage from Tuesday's debate. The campaign said the ad is, quote, spotlighting her commitment to bring a sense of optimism about what we can do.
Period. There will be no third debate. This comes after his debate with President Biden back in June and just Tuesday's debate with Harris, hosted by ABC, which was watched by 67 million Americans. After that, Harris said she would agree to a second debate with Trump. Trump said he would think about it, but now we have a clear answer. And on the campaign trail, the Grand Canyon State is in the spotlight on Thursday. Trump is rallying in Tucson, working to win over undecided voters in this swing state. Then he heads to California for an evening fundraiser. And around the same time, just miles away, Vice President Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, is holding a campaign event also in Tucson. Arizona has historically favored Republican presidential candidates, voting Trump in 2016 and nearly re-electing him in 2020. President Joe Biden won the state by 0.3%. Now, Biden is the first Democrat to win Arizona since 1996, and by a narrow margin. Before that, it had been another 50 years since a Democrat won the state. Next week, Trump will hold a town hall in Flint, Michigan, where he's likely to discuss policy proposals relating to inflation and the auto industry. Trump's against a growing push to transition from gas-powered vehicles to electric, and he says that gas-powered car bans will put thousands out of jobs. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
William Luther, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
William, Americans are expecting the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates in the very near future. With inflation still being a concern, is this a good sign, and what will be the net result in your opinion?
What the Fed has said it will do is bring inflation back down to 2%. So they're already at a high level, but they're going to continue to grow at 2%. Now, the good news is that as far as that goes, the Fed has more or less already done that. Prices are currently growing at around 2% annualized on a monthly basis. And so long as prices can continue to grow at that rate, then we'll have 2% inflation here going forward. Of course, that means that prices remain high for Americans, and they're disappointed in that. But the alternative is for the Fed to maintain tight monetary policy, to bring those prices down further.
Now, William, we're fresh off of the debate between the two presidential candidates, where obviously the economy is the number one issue for the American people. Talk to us about the tale of two different economic approaches and what you took away from both candidates' approach to the economy.
I think it's just much easier to look at the track records of their respective administrations. And in the Biden-Harris administration, what we have seen is very much a top-down approach to managing the economy, where they want to do things like control prices. You see this very clearly with their efforts related to prescription drugs. Right? How do they deal with prescription drug prices rising? They cap those prices. Compare that to the Trump administration, which took a very different approach to rising prescription drug prices. What the Trump administration did was to remove some regulatory barriers there in that space in order to encourage the development of generic drugs, and that brought those prescription drug prices down. So, I think we have two very different approaches. One is interested in removing those regulatory barriers. The other, a more top-down approach, which ultimately discourages innovation.
Now, William, earlier today you actually spoke at the Cato Institute with regard to financial privacy. This is something that most Americans also care very much about. Can you sort of tell us what you're seeing in this context right now in the United States?
Well, unfortunately, Americans don't have a lot of financial privacy. The U.S. government has weaponized the banking system to monitor customer transactions and to report those customer transactions. And inflation has generally eroded the real reporting requirements over time. So if you go back to 1972, when the Bank Secrecy Act rules were rolled out, banks had to report transactions that were what would today be worth around $74,000. The actual threshold was $10,000, but of course $10,000 bought a lot more back then. Since that hasn't been adjusted, now they're reporting transactions of just $10,000. And for money services businesses, they have to maintain records on transactions of just $3,000. And so we've really seen the real value of those reporting requirements erode over time, and correspondingly, the financial privacy that Americans enjoy has been eroded as well.
Yep.
William Luther, really appreciate your perspective. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that is all we have for you this evening on the Capitol Report. For round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live and download our NTD mobile app. From the nation's capital, I'm Steve Lance. Have a nice evening. See you back here tomorrow.